have such sights to show you. I don't know what the hell that was. Take it as you will, or whatever. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate. Stopping, I guess I was trying to do the Miss Pinhead. Stopping on by, this time coming your way to review a movie that I didn't necessarily know if I'd ever see, but my mom in 2000, when the hell was it? 2023, she got Hulu to watch Only Murders in the Building, which I thought season one was really fun, being, having grown up in the 80s and being a big fan of Steve Martin, and kind of not necessarily a fan of Martin Short at the time, but now because it's, kind of a face from my youth, it was fun to see Steve Martin and Martin Short in that that series. And unfortunately, I felt like as the series wore on, it just turned into more and more garbage. And Mom was able to actually get all the way through season, was it 4? But I, 2 or 3 episodes in, I gave up. But the whole reason I'm bringing that up is Mom got Hulu to watch that show, and she's had it with the show. And after she finished it, she went to cancel Hulu, and I thought, well, in the days leading up to her Hulu being over, I'm like, why don't I just watch Hellraiser, Hellraiser Hulu, or the Hellraiser 2022 while I still can, and I did. And this being 2 hours long, I was like, God damn it, why is this 2 hours long? And I guess right off the bat, I can say that I was actually surprised about this with this movie. And when after seeing it, because I didn't know a whole hell of a lot about it, other than, it was just, I guess I kind of regarded it, but without knowing much about it, as like a remake. But actually having seen it, you don't necessarily have to call it a remake. You can just call it, I would just refer to this as like another Hellraiser movie. Like, you don't have to put it in there's nothing about it that really would put it in the remake category. It's just another Hellraiser movie. And there was all this talk about, of course, as so many things are these days, with formerly male characters, or dominating male characters now being replaced by, dominating female characters. Obviously, there was a little, whatever talk and this and that about, Pinhead now being a woman. And then I saw some on forums and stuff back when this movie happened. I read stuff like, Pinhead was originally a woman and all this stuff, so I don't know anything about that. Like, I don't care enough to know about, like, the history of the story that inspired, the Hellraiser films or anything. But what I can say, as just this movie, like, existing on its own, whatever, Hulu, and it is a bummer because, like, I did see Prey as well, which I thought was okay. And that movie actually, miraculously, it doesn't really matter because I don't plan to necessarily ever buy it, but that movie miraculously is a title that escaped like the streaming only thing, and actually Prey is on Blu-ray and possibly 4K, which is something. It is kind of a shame that, as far as I know, the Hulu Hellraiser is not on Blu-ray or 4K. And it's kind of a bummer, because I almost would possibly even consider, if I could get it cheap enough, buying this, because I was actually pretty surprised by it and more or less impressed, because, like, it should be said that I've only seen, like, the Hellraiser movies I've only gone up to is like 4, so I haven't, I don't know how many Hellraiser direct-to-video sequels there are, probably a lot, but I haven't seen anything past 4, I don't think. Or at least that I can remember. And what I thought was really interesting about this, and it's funny how it took them this long to do it. The thing what was really interesting about this is, it's like, if you really are interested in, like, I guess more of an in-depth view of the Cenobites and maybe their modus operandi, or what makes them tick, or why they do what they do, or whatever. This movie delves more into, like, it's funny because we've got glimpses of, like, in the second film, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, of course, the box turns into that more of a dagger, the two-pointed, like, almost dagger kind of a thing, and they go to hell or whatever it is, and there's this big version of it in the sky and all this and that happening. And what's really cool is this movie, obviously, it uses that same thing. And what's really cool about this movie, compared to any of the Hellraisers that I've seen before, is they actually, and they may have done this in sequels I haven't seen or whatever, and maybe this exists in the Hellraiser lore in print and or graphic novel form, I don't know. But this is the first time I can remember seeing it in a movie, and they have this kind of this graph of like all the different shapes of the box. It's like a puzzle box that starts as the box, but there's, you know, there's different stages that represent different whatevers, and the final stage being, you know, the whatever, you know, the ultimate whatever or whatever. Is that when you're like turned into a, that might be the stage of where like the puzzle, you know, solver is turned into like a Cenobite or something. But all I know is it wasn't hard to understand. It was hard to understand it all. You know me, like just a single viewing, especially if it's 2 hours long. But one thing that I did really love about it was just kind of like breaking down like the stages of the box, and because in all the movies I've seen, even though we've seen it change into different, you know, shapes and things, like there's no explanation. And I'm not saying like the explanation is necessary, like those Hellraiser films worked for, you know, themselves, and not everything needs to be explained. But what I am saying about this film is it was something, you know, was it necessary to explain all this stuff? Not necessarily, but it was something different in a Hellraiser film compared to anything that I've seen in a Hellraiser film before. You know, it was kind of like an excuse for them to do another one or whatever. It's like I really enjoyed that kind of just like the stages to get to whatever, and honestly the way the Cenobites worked in this movie I thought was relatively well done. My only criticisms with this movie is I'm not necessarily sure it needs to be 2 hours long, but my criticism, you know, the biggest criticism is it's like same thing with like the Evil Dead remake and possibly Evil Dead Rise. I'd seen it like a year ago now. I can't remember the details, but it's like, what is with all these like junkie women? Like in the Evil Dead remake, it's like this junkie trying to get, you know, this drug addict trying to get clean. In this movie, you've got the drug addict. You know, I don't think necessarily she's even trying to get clean in this movie, but her brother wants her clean. But what is it with these drug addict, like short, big bone drug addict chicks in these, you know, new versions of old beloved horror franchises and stuff? And like I say, I can't remember if there was, I can only assume someone was a drug addict in Evil Dead Rise. They sure looked like it if they weren't. But yeah, not thrilled with so many of these like characters being just like, you know, drug addicts and just addicted, you know, people to just being so sleazy and whatever. But I mean, I guess it's kind of breaks the mold of like, you know, the putting the women, you know, the thing that's going on with the women can do everything and the men are nothing, and now you've got like a deadbeat woman. But what's with these short, big bone women all of a sudden, like just being in everything? Alien Romulus, and you know, oh, this was 2022, but you know, 2 years before Alien Romulus, you got Hellraiser, Hulu Hellraiser, which should be the title, would be really funny. Hulu Hellraiser. That should be the title. But ooh, before I forget, one thing that I was really kind of, you know, happy to hear is that is it Christopher? I want to say it's Christopher Young. Is that the guy who did the, you know, the original music in the first film, the classic Hellraiser music? Christopher, it possibly is Christopher Young. If not, I'll put his correct name on the screen. But the music, you know, and what I like about it is you kind of got teased the theme throughout the course of the movie, and by the second, you know, when you're in the second half and stuff, they're doing pretty much full-on Hellraiser theme, which was appreciated by me. I stuck around for the end credits, and I was so pissed off to see music by, you know, whoever adapted the theme and whoever did the music for this movie. And after that, nothing about original themes by Christopher Young. It's like a thing. And probably even like Alien Romulus, although there was, you know, a lot less Jerry Goldsmith music in Alien Romulus, but I don't know if they even mentioned Jerry Goldsmith in the credits. They you know, possibly if you watch further into the scrolling credits, if there are any in Hulu Hellraiser, maybe they mentioned Christopher Young. But to use so much of his music being so prevalent, and to not be like, you know, music by Joe Schmo, this guy, themes by Christopher Young, it's just like, to me, that's just like blasphemy. It's just, that's so disappointing. But as I kind of wrapped down the review, like, I wasn't necessarily, like the opening scene I actually thought was kind of cool in this movie, like the way you see the box and then the camera kind of moves up and you see that it looks like a box from the front, but it's this different shape, and then throughout the course of the movie you learn why that was, and when the drug addict character comes across the box, it's obviously it's familiar box shape, and we get to see the progression of the shape as time goes on. And you know, it's arguable that although I kind of appreciate and enjoy the detail-oriented aspect of this movie, and like, you know, the box needing a human sacrifice to whatever to advance to the next, if I'm understanding correctly, possibly not, you know my brain, you know, like, you know, solving the next stage of the puzzle, and then this shing, this little blade coming out, and whether, I don't know if that's meant, it's probably meant to get the possibly the person using it or whatever, but yeah, I think that's what's kind of required to maybe possibly get to the next stage of the puzzle box. I don't know, but yeah, like you know, let's face it, having grown up in the 80s and, you know, being a kid who was just getting into horror movies right around the time that the first Hellraiser and right around the time the second Hellraiser was coming out, like I can remember being on vacation. My dad's mom used to live in Montana, and we were in a little town, you know, where she used to live, and there was like one video store in the town, and there was a Hellraiser 2 poster in the window, and I just like, wow, man, those were the days. The mom and pop video store in this, you know, this small Montana town, and a Hellraiser, you know, Hellbound Hellraiser 2 poster in the window. But, you know, I mean, you can look at it two different ways. It's kind of like the same thing with with the 2007 Halloween remake, where it's like they get into all the nitty and gritty of why Michael became a killer, and it's like, in that case, I don't even, you know, I disagree with that completely, like showing, you know, why Michael became a killer, or maybe not, you know, he was already kind of goofy, but the bullying didn't help, kind of a thing, and maybe the bullying is what, you know, led him to kill as early as he did in the 2007 Halloween. But this is kind of, I kind of compared it to that, and I'm like, you know, I can understand, you know, really big Hellraiser fans out there being like, well, I don't want to know all the ins and outs or whatever of the, you know, the specifics of the box puzzle thing and stuff, and it's just like, I hear you, I don't disagree with that, but in my case, it's just like, well, you know, there's been so many Hellraiser films, and I can't, you know, not having seen so many of the more recent ones, I can't speak to them or whatever, but from what I've seen, like, they kind of don't, you know, they have this puzzle box, which is an intricate part of the movie, but it doesn't really do anything. At least this one, it's like it's its own character, and by having it, you know, by making it clear to the viewer that it's got these stages and this and that, you kind of know what the hell's going to happen or whatever and this and that. And I really love the fact that this rich billionaire guy, what happened to him, like, I don't know how to explain it, but he was like on the path, you know. Yeah, I think I think they really do a great job with delving into the details regarding around just, you know, this whole Cenobite lore and the pain and pleasure and stuff, and this billionaire hoping to, I can't remember what he wanted to achieve, but of course they ended up kind of half-assed turning him into like a, you know, they put this really nasty freaking thing like through him, which was like torturing him, and it's just like, well, this is what, I can't remember what he wanted, but the Cenobites are like, well, this is what, you know, this is what we do, or whatever, or this is what, you know, you maybe this isn't what you wanted, but it's what you got. I can't remember what the lineage was, but this billionaire, you know, wants to get this, you know, understandably so, this torture device, which is, you know, this big golden thing that's going in, you know, can be seen like going in one side, coming out his back. What's so funny is he wears like a you know, button-down shirt and a suit coat, you know, while he's got this thing going, you know, in his front and out his back, and this torture device. It's so funny and kind of, you know, kind of interesting, and that's why this movie was surprisingly kind of good. I didn't need all like maybe the first 20 minutes or 30 minutes of this junkie chick. You know, maybe cut it down a little, but I did also appreciate, you know, the movie's just very, very gradual, you know, progression into, you know, it kind of went in a nice pace to eventually end up where it needed to. But by the last half or whatever, I'm just like, I'm really kind of enjoying it, and it's just like, wow, this is kind of a cool Hellraiser movie. This guy, this billionaire, kind of built this whole, you know, mansion house around this one goal to, I can't remember what he wanted to achieve by doing this puzzle box stuff, but he kind of built this whole mansion house around, you know, the wanting to achieve this goal of whatever he thought he wanted to achieve. Of course, he ends up, at the end of the movie, kind of like with that scene, that one doctor in Hellbound Hellraiser 2 becoming a Cenobite or whatever. And I thought he was going to actually kind of turn into that same one, with the things, the wires and stuff. But he's a different, character, whatever, which is fine. But another thing I thought was cool about this movie is, unlike some of the first ones where the Cenobites were more just side characters that showed up, very infrequently, like the Cenobites, although they're not in it terribly amount, I mean, they're in it more and more as the movie wears on, but just like with the details of like the puzzle box being more explained, like also like the as each phase is entered, I guess, via more or less a human sacrifice, that means, of course, the Cenobite is going to show up to, whatever, take the sacrifice or perform the sacrifice. Like halfway through the movie or something, like you see a really cool one where they're like trying to drive away in a van with this individual, and like this person is like, I can't remember why it's happening, and maybe the puzzle box was just solved before they tried to escape in the van or whatever, but there's this really cool part where like the Cenobites, how in the original couple movies, like they do the same thing in this movie where, like this happens or that happens, the light gets weird, or, a door will just open up on a wall where it shouldn't have a door or whatever. This really cool scene in the van where like the van just like stretched back, so it was like this kind of like, if you had some, mind-altering substances, man, it would have been heavy. But this kind of just like the van like just looks like it's stretched all the way back, and this person kind of, we've seen it in movies before, I think, but kind of, became in that way like distanced from the reality, and became, engulfed in like the, Hulu Hellraiser world or whatever. A lot of, or several instances of relatively like creative and well done kind of Hellraiser-ish sequences, and like I say, the Cenobites, I think, were really utilized perfectly in this movie, where like the first half maybe not so much, but as the movie wears on, just gradually more and more Cenobite-ish stuff is happening, and it's honestly kind of cool when it happens. I'm not really fond of like any of the Cenobites' really appearance. I mean, being a kid of, the 80s, having grown up with the original Hellraiser films, like the Cenobites I don't think look anything as cool as they look in the original movies. Like the makeup looks like it's just CG makeup and not even real makeup and stuff. But so I'm not necessarily crazy about like how the Cenobites look or sound or anything, but like some of the scenes that they do with the Cenobites in regards to just the cinematic technique used to do some of those scenes, I did appreciate. Yeah, I think I've talked enough about Hulu Hellraiser, and yeah, the more I talk about it, actually my star rating has kind of gone up the more I talk about it, because I'm remembering. It hasn't been that long since I've seen it, but I kind of forgot, like when I sat down to talk about it, about the billionaire guy and that gold, big hunk of torture machinery that's like attached to him, going in his, basically through him. And, has these pulleys that are, just torturing them every now and then or whatever and stuff. So it actually was, it kind of reminded me of, Hellraiser 3 with that one guy who got it was, the nightclub owner who got the statue and this and that. But I really thought like the billionaire angle and him sacrificing the guy at the beginning like he does, really being kind of a cool angle. And the way they shot the sacrifice of the guy at the beginning of the movie, while it was just like happening in the background while the billionaire guy was in the foreground, I thought that was cinematically really well done. So very surprised about Hulu Hellraiser. And I do kind of hope in a way that it ends up coming out on disc. I mean, if it hasn't by now, which I don't think it has, it might never, which is kind of a bummer. But, it's not something that I'd really necessarily need to see that often anyway. But being able to see it for free right before my mom's Hulu subscription, expired or whatever, was something that, I'm glad I did. And my star rating, I could go as high as 2.5 stars out of 4 stars for Hulu Hellraiser, although there's a lot of like just white trash, ghetto kind of junky stuff at the beginning to deal with and stuff, and other details that I won't bother even mentioning that are very prevalent in the media of TV and movies of today that I could have gone without. But that's what happens. That's progress, I guess. I'm just so glad there's so many movies that exist before the progress started. I mostly watch, you know, older movies and, you know, either see for the first time or just rewatch older movies. And it's not that often that I you know, delve into newer stuff, and, you know, for good reason. But I guess that'll pretty much be my review for Hulu Hellraiser. Surprisingly not horrible, and it did a lot of things that I'd never seen before in a Hellraiser movie. And as I said, the idea, like the billionaire who had this goal of whatever the hell he was trying to achieve. I can't remember if he achieved what he wanted to or not. But oh, and right before I end the review, the one cool thing about, hey, you know what, this almost makes having the junkie worth it. At the very end, and this is probably spoiling it, the Cenobites, she's the junkie, the short junkie chick, is in a position to, you know, ask the Cenobites for what she wants, and she says, I think she says like nothing, you know. And then what's really cool is, okay, so the Cenobite, like Miss Pinhead, says like, okay, so, you know, we're going to give you nothing, but, you know, your pain or whatever will be living with, I mean, we're not going to do anything physically to you like we normally do, but your pain will simply be living with the consequences of getting people you know, love killed, and just, you know, dealing with that your whole life. That will be your torment or your torture or your hell. And I was like, oh my God, that was actually really pretty cool. And it's like, for once, you know, and yeah. So I completely forgot about that until just right now. So maybe that's, you know, a worthwhile reason to have this junkie who finally, like, chose maybe arguably the more difficult, you know how there's that line from the Weatherman, like the easiest, or the right choice is always the hard choice. You know, the easy choice is not the right choice. The hard choice is often the right choice. And I guess it kind of just maybe was a little bit of a statement at the very end of that movie, where it's like she's finally, you know, ready to, you know, just accept responsibility, you know, and is willing to not take maybe the easy way out, and is willing to just deal with the emotional turmoil of, like, you know, Miss Pinhead said, deal with the consequences of your actions, which led to the loss of your loved one and or loved ones or whatever. So I guess that pretty much does it for this review. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more it'd be nice to have on Blu-ray, but I kind of like to show Beth, too late now. I think the Hulu's gone, but oh well. We've got other things to watch. So I guess that pretty much does it for this review. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.